how I went from single to engaged in 6 months, told through the lens of how you can do the same if that's what you want. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about a few things you should be on the lookout for that mean you should not get engaged quickly. Before we get started, I want to give you some of the backstory, which is that first for 10 years, I attempted to date and just failed. I mean, I spent a decade just being single. So before I went 6 months single to engaged, I was just single for the most part.
I was once in a committed relationship with a guy, but neither of us were really interested in falling in love with each other.
Anyway, fast forward, I'm reaching the end of my late 20s and I realize I'm not just a late bloomer anymore. I'm actually maybe just not meant for love. Like maybe there's no chance for me. There's no hope for me. I am just one of those people who's destined to be like, I mean, I wanted to be an amazing person who traveled the world constantly and always had cool things going on. And I was like, okay, I won't be a boring person, but I was not going to be someone who actually had family, which is what I really wanted. In the end, I really wanted to be in a relationship, be in a marriage, raise children, enjoy life with a partner. I had reached a point where I was willing to settle for a single life, but I didn't really want to do that. So I was dating this guy who was not into sleeping with me, and that really hurt my self-esteem. But luckily, he was into some spiritual stuff, including Tantra and Tantric practice, and he told me that the reason we couldn't sleep together was because of his practice. So I didn't know what that meant back then. I had no idea what Tantra was or like really very many spiritual things at all. And I did what any self-respecting person would do. I went and took my question to the internet. And so I asked the internet what kind of tantric practices made you abstain from sex. It turns out there aren't really that many beyond joining monkhood and becoming an absolute celibate. But I was on the trail of whatever this guy was into and just looking anywhere I could. I never ever found it in the end. But what I did find was a whole bunch of research on how to change relationships, how to be energetically attractive, how to magnetically attract people into your life, into great relationships, and how to relate to people in ways that create relationship rather than pushing men away, which is what I had been doing for those previous 10 years of my dating life. So some of the things I was studying at that time were things like Tantra, feminine energy, dating technique, dating strategy, connection, how emotional connection works, all kinds of things that lead to deep, fulfilling relationships. And I spent several months doing this research, and luckily I was dating a guy who wasn't, again, that into me, so I had plenty of time to spend on my own doing all this research, reading books, watching YouTube, and anything I could get my hands on. At the end of this many-month period, my life actually completely fell apart in terms of where I was living, the job I was doing, and that kind of meant the end of that relationship. So I packed everything up and I went away. And I was trying to figure out how to start over. And while I was figuring out how to start over, I decided to start over in dating. And what happened next was not the big miracle of meeting my person and immediately 6 months later becoming engaged, but it was a slightly smaller miracle that still felt like the biggest miracle of my life at the time. And that is that I went back to dating, and this time I used all of the strategy that I had learned, and immediately my life turned around. Like my dating life was just 180 degrees different. Now here's something to be aware of first. I didn't actually attract a better man the first 2 dates I went on. So first of all, I braved online dating for the first time in my life after I had learned all of this strategy. And the first 2 dates I went on, those men did not turn out to be better than other men that I had ever met. And what was different was how I responded. So the first thing that you want to be aware of is that when we're talking about becoming someone who's really energetically attractive and is able to create the kind of relationship that can go from single to engaged in a healthy way in 6 months or less, it requires that you are in a really strong space mentally and emotionally. And I had finally gotten to that space through all of the work that I had done on my own. I was okay just saying no to these men because I could tell they were not right for me and they did not treat me the way that I wanted to be treated, and therefore I was okay just saying no. Previously, that had been really difficult for me. I had not been able to do that with men, and that was really a pivotal moment in dating for me, was learning that actually I will take care of myself. Like I will actually say the thing that needs to be said, and that will change how dating goes for me, because I will let someone know if I don't want to see them again instead of being wishy-washy, which is usually what I was previously, super wishy-washy. I became someone who said no when I meant no. All right, third date, let's talk about it. This guy was amazing. This guy I actually ended up talking to for a couple years. We'll get to that in a moment. But essentially it was just a completely new kind of connection. What an incredible person he is, and how amazing that I get to meet him. You know, that was the kind of connection that it was. I ended up leaving the country that we met in, so then we had to just keep talking over text, and I ended up back in America. In America, I tried the same thing again because I was like, does this actually work, or was this just a fluke that it worked because I was kind of in this in-between space and I didn't have a lot of responsibilities? Maybe I was just really interesting and available then. No, America was the same story. It was just immediately the guy that I met there was incredible, like really an interesting, beautiful human. So glad I met him. Then I decided to go to vocal school in Denmark. So I packed up and moved across continents again and tried it again. Now here's the thing that was happening for me in dating at this point. Suddenly I was meeting men who actually had real relationship potential, who I could see myself being with, and who genuinely made me feel amazing. Like, these men treated me like an absolute queen. They treated me so well, and I loved it. This is the other thing that was different from my previous dating situations, where I felt kind of unworthy of the kind of attention that I received when it was positive, and if it was negative, I just felt really bad about myself instead of just saying no. So this is where you have to get to first, is you have to be in a place where you are okay to say no to the negative things and able to say yes to the really positive, lovely things that men absolutely can do for you if you do some of the things we're about to talk about. So I fly off to Denmark. I get on dating apps again because at this point I'm feeling pretty secure, right? I'm feeling pretty sure that this kind of dating works and helps you meet incredible men. Once again, I start meeting really great men. Now here's one of the things you want to keep in mind. I, at this point, had realized I actually didn't need to be in a relationship. This was one of the big ahas for me, is at that point in my life, I wasn't actually craving someone to be like, we need to commit. Once I actually got into these amazing relationships with men, like once I was finally relating to men on a level that said, we are having a great time together and I enjoy your company, you obviously love my company, like they really making me feel incredible about myself and us together, I no longer had this kind of need for relationship. Very interestingly, it just kind of dissipated, even though I had spent over 10 years of my life really wanting that. And what was so cool about that is that it gave me a longer period of my life where I was able to just enjoy the company of men and really start appreciating men for who men are without getting worried about, like, is this gonna lead to marriage? And I had so much fun. So that was another pivotal thing I would say, is that instead of being focused on getting to the end goal of, committed relationship or engagement or marriage, I had finally gotten into this energy of being really available for relating to someone, for relationship in the bigger sense, like really being in connection and relationship with someone instead of just waiting to get the label or the rock. So that's what's important about the backstory, is that I had gotten to this place where I could do those three things. I could say no when I meant no, I could accept what I really loved from men, and I was focused on being in relationship and having a great time with men rather than making sure that I got to the end goal. Now let's talk about what it took for me to go from single to engaged in 6 months. Also, like and subscribe if you're having a great time. Okay, what happened right before I met my husband is that I was in not necessarily a great place in life. I actually didn't have to be like, let's talk manifestation for a quick second. I didn't actually have to be like outrageously happy, living my dream life, everything perfect, feeling great every day, doing everything great every day. But what I did do is I got really focused about creating that life, and I got really focused on creating that kind of connection. And I don't mean like I was dating a whole bunch and creating that with men. I was really just thinking about it. I was really sure that's what I wanted, and I had finally decided I did want to date to be in a relationship. I made the decision that I was just going to date for relationships. So it was like, no more just playing around, right? It was like, no more just having fun. Like, let's get serious for now. now. Like, it's time to actually, yes, relate to a man in a fun way, but also be very intentional about what I'm creating with him. So first, I was really focused. I was very serious about that. And I was really thinking intentionally about the rest of my life too, and how I could make my life the best life possible and have everything that I wanted in life, which was many things. The next thing I did is I started acting from that space. So I began taking action. You might call it aligned action, right? So I was like, I want to meet a life partner type person. So which dating apps should I be on? And I kept my fun vibe up. I always recommend that you choose a dating app that you really like, because if you don't like being on the dating app, there's no point in you being there. So I picked a dating app that I wanted to try out. Actually, I was just there to experiment in a way. There's kind of this balance, right? It was really intentional, but I was also willing to be playful. I was willing to experiment and be playful. And then what happened is that I spent almost a week just chatting men who were fine. They were interesting. They weren't doing a lot of the things I look for in men on dating apps. They weren't really initiating in conversation, and they weren't really keeping me entertained, making me feel great about dating and being on the dating app. So I didn't spend too much energy on them. And then I was just one day flipping through, it was a Thursday, so I was just very casually, flipping through there. I always recommend that you spend regular amounts of time when you're very serious about finding a relationship. You want to be on the apps pretty regularly. You don't need to be on there all the time, but just sort of intentionally returning to them once in a while, depending on your mood, depending on how much excitement you can generate for your future partner in any given time. So it's a Thursday. I happen to see this profile of a very attractive man who has the word personal growth on his profile. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a personal growth junkie. I love personal growth. I spend all my money on it. It's my job. It's literally, I'm a dating coach. Personal growth is my job. And so I didn't even read the rest of his profile. I just wrote him a message immediately telling him that I was incredibly into personal growth and also long conversations over nachos, which is the other thing that he mentioned he was very into. He writes back later that night and tells me, great, do you want to grab some nachos tomorrow? I said yes, because it's a Friday, so I may as well. We don't exchange any other texts. And usually I vet people a little bit more than that before meeting them for a date, but I was really in this place, again, of very open, very willing to relate to people, very ready to respect myself with people, and ready to meet them where they were. And so I didn't have to worry really about meeting him and whether, how it was gonna be between us, because I knew I would be okay. I really trusted that I would be okay because I knew I would take care of myself. And worst case scenario, I would leave, and best case scenario, is what happened. So let's just say he was an incredible human, right? So anyway, we go on this date, we have a great time, break many of those first date rules that dating coaches tell you. Sorry, you're welcome. And we talk for a long time. Our exes do get mentioned, all of these things, So anyway, it's a great time. The next day I go see a friend, but I still text him later that day just to say, thank you so much for last night. I had a great time. He texts back, me too, and then suggests our next date. So here's great signs, right? Like, he's really taking initiative. He's really making an effort. He's not a big chatter, which is fine because I also hate to text. So this works out perfectly for me, but he's definitely on the ball when it comes to let's hang out, let's spend time together. I come back from this trip and I go see him immediately the next day. Then we end up having about 3 dates the first week that we know each other. And that just continues from there. What happened for us is that we almost immediately became really close in terms of emotional connection. So I'm not talking about sex at all. This was very much a friendship-ish kind of a thing going on in terms of we love talking to each other. Like, we just really immediately clicked in that kind of magic way. And so that's what was happening, is we were just having a really amazing time every time we spent time together. And I didn't worry, right? So here's the thing. I didn't get into my worry about does he like spending time with me? Because it was just so obvious, right? He's asking me to spend time with him. Being really truthful, honest, and in integrity with each other the whole way through, and having a great time while we're doing it. Having a lot of fun, lots of shared humor. It's a great time. In the second week, things start to get a little more serious, because at this point, it's kind of like, okay, we are now spending like a lot of time together. Like this is not usually how much time you spend with someone you've just met. There was nothing to regret in a way. There was nothing that was like a big red flag about like how things are going and how we communicated. Everything flowed. Like it really was just very easy because of being in this space of like able to uphold boundaries and also being totally open to meet a new person. He starts to do things like learn to make eggs Benedict, which is my favorite brunch, and I'm ordering it everywhere I go, and so he may as well just learn to make it at home and then cook it for me, which he did then for the 3rd month we knew each other. Basically every single day this man made me eggs Benedict from scratch. And at that point he meets my family. My family lives in the same town and we celebrate a lot of things together all the time. We love to party together. He meets everyone. He's great. Everything's great. We're having a great time. Everything fits together. His family also lives relatively nearby, so we go and I meet them. Totally fine. Everything's great. I also want to say, when I say easy, I don't mean that we are just having a great sunshiny fun time, because I think I might have made it sound like that. There were plenty of things going on that were triggering our deep emotional stuff, because we were being really honest with each other. We were really sharing a large spectrum of who we were with each other in a very real way. That meant that we kind of quickly got to see some of the more intense sides of the other person and really had to, expand together. We really had to be together in this kind of emotional space. Now, here's the thing. Many people will not be able to handle a lot of your emotional stuff, especially at the beginning. So it's really important to be careful that you're not like kind of throwing your baggage at new people, but it's also really good to know that someone has capacity to be with your deep hurts, because you have deep hurts, right? I have deep hurts. Like, no matter how great your childhood was or how whatever your life is right now, there are going to be places where life is hard for you. And so it's really important that you are with a partner who can be with you in those spaces. So what we were doing during this time is really learning to be with each other in the fun, in the humor, in the laughter, in the great times, but also in the hard times, in the shutdown and in the things about life that have made us sad and hurt us in the past. So for us, there was also a willingness to be with the full spectrum of who the other person was, not just sort of, picking apart like, ooh, you're fun and I like that. Ooh, you're kind of sad about this and that's really obnoxious. We didn't have that. It was very much holding each other in those spaces together. After we'd met each other's family and all of that, it kind of became very relaxed for us to just be together in terms of being in a committed relationship. And around the 3rd month, maybe 4th, is when he asked me what I thought about marriage and what I would think about marrying him. And I told him at that point, I did a check-in with my body. So I did some somatic work to really make sure that it felt okay for me to answer, because that question was a little bit confronting that quickly, like I had not expected it. And I felt so safe. I felt so safe and I felt so seen and I felt very relaxed, actually. Like I actually wasn't freaking out, even though the question seemed like it should be confronting. And so I said, yeah, I want to get married. Obviously, we had talked about that before, is in terms of our life visions, like our goals in life. I said, if you asked me, I'd probably say yes. So then we had some ring conversations and several other conversations about like what marriage is and how all of that looks to us, children, all that kind of good stuff. And then a few months later, he proposed. And I went from single in October to engaged by April. Here are a couple things to be on the lookout for that mean you should not get engaged quickly. Don't do it. Don't do it in these cases. The first thing is if you have any sense of urgency. So if there's any sense, either in you or him, like we need to do this, like we need to get this done, don't do it. Like if you're pregnant, don't do it. That's not a reason to get married. If you are just feeling kind of anxious, don't get engaged. Getting engaged in a good relationship should not be anxiety producing. Don't get engaged if there are things that you're uncomfortable saying to them. So when I'm talking about my husband and I got really comfortable sharing our full truth and being really honest with each other, I mean like really sharing things with each other. Like a lot of things that I would have been ashamed to say out loud, I said to him. Like there were many times that it was like reveal, right? Big reveal with him. And I don't recommend that you get engaged to someone that you can't say hard things to, because you're gonna have to say hard things to your life partner. Don't get engaged if you haven't discussed what your vision of marriage is and what your future goals for marriage and life are. Hopefully that one's self-explanatory. Just don't do that. Don't do that. And then here's another reason for those of you, thank you for sticking around till the end. Don't get engaged to them if they don't have the ability to grow. If they are growth averse in any way, so that looks like they're not willing to do therapy, they don't believe in it, or they are really sure that it's always your fault when something happens, and they aren't willing to think about themselves and self-reflect about how they show up in a relationship, don't get engaged to that person, because it's going to be a long drag with someone who cannot take responsibility for their half of the relationship. And if you're always having to put in more work than them, you won't want to do that for a long time. If you have any questions about that, leave them in the comments. I will get back to you as soon as I can. And check out the video that I'm putting somewhere here, hopefully, that tells you more about how to communicate emotionally in ways that will get you into powerful connection with people, that gets you quickly into relating to them in a way that makes them want to commit to you. And if you want to stick around for a long time as well as a good time, click subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified every time that I release a video, and I'll see you next week.